prepare ourselves, if you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And now over your heart, and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Comes from Paul in the book of Romans, and it's demonstrated by so many people in this church this morning. You know, transformation means to make a thorough and dramatic change in your form, in your appearance, in your character. You know, some of those in this room have renewed our mind through the process of recovery from addiction. And the change in our form, in our appearance, and our character has been quite dramatic. Some of us in this room have renewed our mind by taking classes and workshops here at the church. And you tell me that the change in your form, in your appearance, and your character has been quite dramatic. Some of you have read New Thought authors, and you tell me that as a result of that and other spiritual readings, that the change, the transformation in your form, in your character, in your appearance, for your good in your life, has been quite dramatic in our life. And while transformation is a fabulous thing for us to celebrate, we want to be clear. Transformation is the result, it's not the cause. The cause of our transformation is the renewing of our mind. That's what brings a new appearance of good in our lives. Ernest Holmes, in his textbook of this theology, is called Science of Mind. He called it Science of Mind because he understood that all change, all transformation, all renewing of the mind has to start with our thought. Here's what he said, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to paraphrase it. Often I paraphrase his work, but I want to just read this. There is no such thing as my mind and your mind and God's mind. There is just one mind, in which we move and live and have our being. He distinguishes thought from mind because that's where our thoughts live. And to the extent we allow our thoughts to be connected to our God mind, our blessings will flow. Mind is potential energy, while thought is the dynamic force which produces the activity of manifestation. Now, you know, Ernest Holmes likes a word. And so I want to just now paraphrase that into a simpler language. Within our individual mind is an unformed substance of everything we want. Within our individualized mind is an unformed substance of everything that we want. Our thought creates a mold for this substance to be filled. And if our thought that goes into our mold is pure, and by pure I don't mean religious, I don't mean sanctimonious. By pure I mean without doubt. If you have a thought that goes into your mold without doubt, it simply welcomes that good that you want in your life. If you want a Lamborghini, stop thinking about a Jeep. If you want passion and compassion in your marriage, stop thinking about all your partner's faults. If you want a scholarship to go back to school, stop thinking about how unfair the world is right now. Remember that the universe simply says yes. So be careful about what you're putting in your mold. If what you're putting in your mold is you're going to get the coronavirus, the universe is likely to say, what? Yes. If you're thinking somebody's going to steal your mate all the time, what the universe is going to reply is yes. So be careful what it is that we put in our mold. God doesn't judge. God doesn't care what you put in your mold. Never thinks of what you put in your mold as bad or unsuccessful or wrong. We think of it as unsuccessful. But God doesn't think that, because whatever it is that we put in our mold, even if it's a thought that's pure, that is not life-affirming, God knows that the consequence of that thought will bring you eventually closer to understanding your soul and how God works. See, nobody goes around and tries to bring unhappiness into their lives. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, geez, I hope I didn't screw up my life today. I'm going to give that my best shot. We screw up our lives, we make mistakes because we don't understand how the one mind works and how we can use it in our life. So today I'm going to conclude a little two-part series I'm doing on the work from Joe Dispenza to help us better understand how this one mind works and better understand how we can use this one mind. He wrote a book called The Placebo Effect, Making Your Mind Matter. Now look, my hope, and I put it up there, I asked Steve to put it up there, because I want everybody to know what this book looks like. I want everybody to go out and get this book. And I especially want the people to go out and get this book who left here last week saying, I didn't really care for that sermon. I thought it was, I thought you were blaming me for having health problems, and it didn't feel right. So as I said in the beginning of last week, my worry, I have studied this man for about 7 years now. I do his meditations. I believe in his work. And yet I have never done a sermon. Why haven't I done a sermon on this guy that I believe so much will help us increase our consciousness? Because I was afraid I would give somebody the idea that I was blaming them for being sick. I am not blaming you for being sick. Nobody in this church is blaming you for being sick. Let me start the same way I started last week, and that is this. Your thinking mind alone, your conscious mind alone, did not cause your illness or your dis-ease in your life in any area, whether it's material or physical or emotional, and nor will it cure it. There's more to it than our thinking mind in our life. Yes, the way we think and the way we live has an impact on our health. So if you have a lifestyle behavior that's not healthy for you, that's not working for you, get rid of it. Let it go in your life. But nobody in this church is trying to shame you. In fact, here's the thing. Reverend Betsy, Reverend Rick, Reverend Brenda, all the ministers, all the chaplains, all the practitioners, we all know this. We won't shame you because we know that shaming doesn't feel good. All of us in this room have been shamed. We know there's no benefit from it. In fact, listen, if shaming works, shaming doesn't work. If shaming worked, coming from my family, I would be straight today. So today, what I want to ask you is, forget about that and just treat this as an open mind. Because here's the thing, you won't transform yourself by thinking the same thing you're thinking today. You have to renew your mind. You have to put renewing stuff into your mind. So today I want to talk about 3 components of Dispenza's work around the placebo effect that we can use to renew our mind and begin to transform our lives. Now, if you weren't here last week, a placebo is simply a sugar pill that has no healing properties, but we believe it does because of the circumstances around how we're taking the sugar pill. So I want to talk about some circumstances that surround our belief that can help us, I think, or help me. And there are 3 of them. One is conditioning, one is expectation, and one is meaning. Dispenza reminds us in this book that we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts every single day. And most of the 60 to 70,000 thoughts we think today, we thought yesterday. And we thought the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that. And if we're not careful, and we don't renew our mind, if we don't think differently about things, the same thought we're thinking today, we're going to think about tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. It's why people, when they come to me and they say, I can't believe I'm attracting the same partner that I attracted the last 4 times I attracted a partner, just in a different bodysuit. And I want to say to them, I get it. I can understand it. You are actually expecting the same person in a different bodysuit to come by and ask you out. And for some reason, you keep saying, yes, sure, I'd like to go. You have conditioned yourself to the outcome. Conditioning is a process of looking at your past, your personal history, to find relief from something that worked and keep repeating it over and over and over again. Now, the condition can be physical, it can be mental, it can be emotional, it can be material. Dispenza uses the example of an aspirin. He says, look, we have a headache, that's an internal condition. We look to the outer to fix our headache up, and we think, oh, an aspirin will help that. That's what we will have for our relief. We take the aspirin, and if we do it enough times, we have conditioned ourselves to believe that the aspirin will cure the headache. It's called associated memory. Okay, associative memory. Now, if we keep repeating this process over and over and over again, once we believe that the aspirin will take care of it, we can actually substitute a sugar pill that looks like aspirin, and once we take it, our body and our brain will come together in the complete pharmacy that we have inside of us to manufacture the cure to your headache. It's called associative memory. That's what conditioning is. So the second component to the placebo effect is expectation. And it comes into play when we have reason to anticipate a different outcome. Conditioning is the process of relying on the past. This used to work, still works. I believe it's going to work. And because I believe it's going to work, it's going to work. Whether it's there or not, I'm going to believe it's going to work, it's going to work. Expectation is based on a future outcome that you anticipate. I was having some back pain about a month ago, and I went to my doctor and I told her I had this back pain, and she has a machine in her office, and it's kind of like a traction machine. And she says to me, this machine is going to help you. Get in this machine. Now, I wasn't thrilled about it, but here's the thing. I believe in this doctor so much that pretty much whatever she tells me to do, I'm going to do. I had a disease that Western medical doctors told me was going to take me out at the end, and until that end, my life quality was going to keep decreasing. Because I've been able to see her, that quality of life, that never happened. I feel like I'm cured from this issue right now in my life. So because of that experience, I had the expectation that I would experience relief from whatever it was she says. Now look, Dispenza is very clear. He says this cannot be a lukewarm expectation. It cannot be a lukewarm expectation. You have to have a live emotional involvement in the expectation. See, I believe completely in this doctor, so she tells me something's going to work, I believe it's going to work. In my mind, I'm picking a different future potential, and I'm hoping, and I'm anticipating, and I'm expecting that I'll get a different result. So how do we do that? If we can emotionally accept, now this isn't a light thing. You can't just think, oh yeah, I think she's probably right. No, you have to emotionally believe it and embrace it. And that may take time for people. That may take some work for people to have a new outcome. Neuroscientists tell us, in addition to Joe, neuroscientists tell us that the body will create the perfect pharmacy to alter our problem. See, my doctor could have told me with the same enthusiasm that she told me about this machine, she could have told me that I would feel better if I took a pill. She could have told me I would feel better if I read a poem. She could have told me that broccoli was going to be the answer to everything. And because I believed in her, all of those things may very well have come to pass. You know, we think of this as outlandish, and I know some of the people last week thought, this is harebrained stuff, this is outlandish stuff. But here's the thing, this is scientific proof of what Jesus was doing over and over and over again. When he told the soldier, look, I don't need to go to your house to cure the person in your house. Your belief in me is going to do this for us. This is neuroscience that we're talking about now. So let's go on to the third component to help us. The third component in the placebo, making the placebo effect work, is called meaning. Conditioning is when we associate the past with something. Expectation is when we have hope in a future, promise of a future change. And meaning, the third element, is when we give action, when we put intention to what it is that we're doing in our life. And that added intention will make whatever we're doing to improve ourselves stronger. So we have an intention that we want to get better at something, we want to get healthier at something, we want to get richer at something, and we have a thought about that, and then we have an intention. We do our work, but we have that work is fused with an intention. So let me read you a story from his book. It's a story that was done from a couple of Harvard psychologists. So, and I say that because I also think that sometimes we think that one author is kind of just a, kind of a kook. And he wrote a book, and some people are going off the deep end with his book. Joe Dispenza infuses his work with all kinds of scientific studies from universities and from well-known scientists all across the world. These are from two Harvard psychologists involving 84 hotel maids. At the start of the study, none of the maids knew that the routine work they performed in their jobs exceeded the Surgeon General's recommendation for a healthy amount of daily exercise. In fact, 67% of the women that told the researchers that they didn't exercise regularly, and 37% they didn't get any exercise. After this initial assessment, the psychologists divided the maids into two groups. They explained to the first group that their activity levels related to the number of calories they burned during their normal working hours, cleaning up, produced more than enough exercise. They also educated them about the health benefits of exercise. They didn't give any such information to the second group, who worked in different hotels from the first group, so they wouldn't benefit from conversations. 1 month later, the researchers found that the first group lost an average of 2 pounds, lowered their percentage of body fat, and lowered their systolic blood pressure by an average of 10 points. Even though they hadn't performed any additional exercise outside of work or changed their eating habits in any way, the other group was doing the same job as the first, and they remained virtually unchanged. Intention is very important in our lives, to be conscious of what we're doing. And not only that, but infuse it with an intention for effect, intention for success in our life. When we assign meaning to what we're doing to better ourselves. So for instance, if you want to improve your debting situation and you cut up your credit cards, that's a good thing. Celebrate yourself for doing it, but set the intention that this activity that you're doing is going to actually benefit your debting situation in your life. See, wanting to be transformed isn't enough. Wanting to be transformed isn't enough. We have work to do. You have to renew your mind. If you're thinking the same thing today that you think tomorrow, you're not going to transform. You may have a great life and you want to keep it that way. You want to keep the status quo. That's fine. But if you want to change, if you want to bring more success into your life, whether it's your compassionate life, or whether it's your organizing life, or whether it's your financial life, or whether it's your love life, or whatever it is, set your intention to transform, to renew. Renewing our mind can be scary. It can be hard work. See, if we think that we're just going to think positive thoughts and that's it, that's a great start. And I hope everybody is thinking positive thoughts. But remember, it's not our thinking mind, it's not our conscious mind that's causing or curing our issues. It's the combination of our conscious and subconscious mind that's causing and curing our issues in our life. So we have to get to both of them, and that takes work. But here's the thing, it's so effective, it can actually change your genes. You know, I stood up here last week, before I got to this chapter, and reminded myself of this chapter, I stood up here last week and said, you know, I've got high cholesterol. I've got, I lost the weight, I exercise, I eat very little meat, and I still have high cholesterol. It's just my genes, it's hereditary, I can't help it. Well, now we know that working with our mind, making our mind matter, you can actually change your genes. You can actually change your DNA. So let me read one more story as I close this out. On a crisp September day in 1981, a group of 8 men in their 70s and 80s climbed into a few vans, headed 2 hours north of Boston to a monastery in St. Petersburg. The men were about to take part in a 5-day retreat where they were asked to pretend they were young again, at least 22 years younger than they were at that time. The retreat was organized by a team of researchers headed by Harvard psychologists who would take another group of 8 elderly men to the same place the following week. The men in the second group of the control were the control group, and they were asked to actively reminisce about being 22 years younger, but not to pretend that they were 20 years, that they weren't their current age. When the first group of men arrived at the monastery, they found themselves surrounded by all sorts of environmental clues to help them recreate an earlier age. They flipped through an old issues of Life in the Saturday Evening Post. They watched movies and television shows popular in '59, and they listened to recordings of Perry Como and Nat King Cole on the radio. They talked about current events such as Fidel Castro's rise to power in Cuba, Russian Premier Nikita Khrushchev's visit to the United States, and even the feats of baseball star Mickey Mantle and boxing great Floyd Patterson. All of these elements were cleverly designed to help the men imagine they were really 22 years younger than they actually were. After each 5-day retreat, the researchers took several measurements and compared them to those they'd taken before the start of the study. The bodies of the men of both groups were physiologically younger, structurally well as functionally, although those in the first group who pretended they were younger improved significantly more than the control group who merely reminisced they were younger. The researchers discovered improvements in height, in weight, and gait. The men grew taller as their postures straightened, and their joints became more flexible, and their fingers lengthened as the arthritis diminished. Their eyesight and hearing got better, their grip strength improved, their memory sharpened, and they scored better on tests of mental cognition, with the first group improving the score by 63%, compared to 44% of the control group. The men literally became younger in those 5 days, right in front of the researchers' eyes. One of the psychologists reported, at the end of the study, I was playing football, touch, but football all the same, with these men, some of whom gave up their canes. How did that happen? Clearly, the men were able to turn on the circuits in their brains that reminded them who they had been 22 years ago. And then their body chemistry somehow magically responded. They didn't just feel younger, they physically became younger, as evidenced by measurements after measurements. The change just wasn't in their minds, it was in their body. This is a powerful piece of scripture that can help us. I encourage us to be careful of contempt prior to investigation. I encourage us to get this book. And if you don't do anything more than read the stories, you'll feel better. But if you read the stories and do the work that he outlines in this book, you will begin to be better in your life. Let's take this message. there is only one power. It's the power of the Most High, the love. I give thanks for that. I give thanks for knowing that what I turn my attention to grows. I give thanks for understanding that I'm a complete being. I release this word into law, and together we say, and so it is.